The women who get gaslighted the hardest are not the ones who can't think clearly. They're the ones who think too clearly. They're the ones who analyze, who process, who try to understand human behavior with precision and good faith. And that is exactly what makes them vulnerable, not their weakness, their depth. There's a persistent myth that manipulation only works on people who aren't paying attention, that if you're intelligent enough, educated enough, self aware enough, you'll see it coming and shut it down. But gaslighting doesn't target ignorance, it targets trust. It targets the part of you that wants to be fair, that wants to give people room to explain themselves, that believes understanding someone is the same as being safe with them. And the sharper your mind is, the more tools you have to rationalize why you should stay. Intelligence is often treated as a form of emotional armor. The assumption is that if you can spot a logical flaw in an argument, you should be able to spot a manipulative partner. But those are two completely different skill sets. Analytical intelligence helps you solve problems. Emotional vulnerability determines how deeply someone's words land inside you. You can have both at the same time. In fact, most intelligent women do. The ability to think critically doesn't switch off when you're in love, but it does change direction. Instead of analyzing the other person's behavior objectively, it starts working in service of the relationship. You begin using your intelligence to explain away red flags instead of responding to them. You find reasons, you build context, you create psychological frameworks for someone's cruelty that are more sophisticated than anything they could have come up with themselves. And every time you do that, you move one step further from your own instincts. This is the part people rarely talk about. Intelligence doesn't protect you from manipulation, it gives you better tools to justify staying inside it. Manipulators don't seek out partners they can easily control. They seek out partners whose surrender means something. A person who gives in because they don't know any better provides no psychological supply. But a person who is perceptive, accomplished, emotionally intelligent, and still chooses to stay, that feels like power. That's the dynamic that feeds them. This is why gaslighters are often drawn to women who ask deep questions, who want to understand motive, who believe in nuance, because those qualities create something a manipulator can exploit: the pause, the moment between experiencing something painful and reacting to it. In that pause, a smart woman doesn't lash out. She reflects. She wonders if she's being fair. She considers the other person's perspective. And the gaslighter steps directly into that space and rewrites the narrative while she's still weighing it. An intelligent woman's instinct to understand becomes the very doorway through which the manipulation enters. She doesn't ignore the red flag, she just gives it the benefit of analysis. And by the time the analysis is finished, the flag has been rationalized into something she can tolerate. Gaslighting doesn't start with a dramatic lie. It starts with a small rewrite. You remember a conversation one way, he remembers it differently, not about something trivial, about something that matters, something that hurt you. And his version doesn't just challenge your memory, it challenges whether your emotional response was justified in the first place. That's the mechanism. It's not about the facts, it's about your right to feel what you felt. And when someone consistently tells you that your reaction was wrong, that you're being too sensitive, that you misunderstood, something starts to shift. Not because you believe them, but because the constant friction between what you experience and what you're being told you experience creates a kind of perceptual exhaustion. You stop trusting your own clarity, not all at once, slowly, like a signal losing frequency. The arguments don't resolve, they recycle. You bring up something that hurt you, and by the end of the conversation, you're apologizing, not because you did something wrong, because the emotional labor of holding your ground became more exhausting than conceding. And that exhaustion is not a character flaw, it's a neurological response to sustained psychological stress. Your brain starts choosing peace over accuracy because accuracy keeps leading to conflict. Over time, something deeper shifts. You stop bringing things up at all, not because the problems disappear, but because you learn that raising them leads nowhere productive. You begin editing yourself before you speak, filtering your tone, softening your language, choosing silence over honesty, because honesty has been punished so many times that your nervous system now registers it as a threat. This is perception destabilization at its core. You haven't lost your ability to see clearly. You've been trained to doubt what you see. Empathy is supposed to be a strength. In most relationships, it is. But inside a manipulative dynamic, empathy becomes a liability because an empathetic woman doesn't just hear what someone says, she feels what they might be going through. She searches for the wound behind the behavior. She asks herself what pain would make a person act this way. And that question, that compassionate, generous question, is the exact question that keeps her trapped. Because when you're always looking for the reason behind someone's cruelty, you start absorbing responsibility for it. If he's angry, maybe you triggered something. If he's distant, maybe you weren't supportive enough. If he lied, maybe he was scared. Empathy fills in the gaps that accountability should occupy. And the more intelligent the woman, the more elaborate the explanations become. She doesn't just excuse the behavior, she constructs an entire emotional biography to make sense of it. That's the trap. The empathy isn't misplaced because she's naive. It's misplaced because it's aimed at someone who has learned to weaponize it. Every time she extends understanding, he gains access. Every time she looks for the deeper explanation, she moves further away from the simplest one. That the behavior is a choice, not a wound. Here is where intelligence becomes the most dangerous tool of all. Because once a smart woman has emotionally invested in someone, her mind doesn't work against the relationship. It works for it. She builds a case, not a case to leave, a case to stay. This is cognitive dissonance at work. When your actions and your instincts don't align, your brain resolves the tension by adjusting the story. You stayed, so there must be a good reason. You forgave, so he must have deserved it. You gave years, so the relationship must have value. The logic isn't flawed in isolation. Each individual justification makes sense. But stacked together, they form a structure that exists only to prevent you from seeing what's actually happening. And this is where intermittent reinforcement does its work. The relationship isn't all bad. There are moments of warmth, tenderness, connection. Those moments don't cancel out the damage, but they give the rationalizing mind just enough material to keep building the case. One good week can undo months of clarity. One vulnerable conversation can reset the entire emotional ledger because the brain doesn't weigh experiences evenly. It clings to the ones that justify the investment. The rationalization loop is not about being foolish. It's about being human inside a pattern designed to exploit exactly how humans process commitment and loss. And the longer you stay, the harder leaving becomes. Not because the relationship improves, but because the cost of admitting it was wrong increases with every month invested. This is sunk cost thinking applied to love. The years, the sacrifices, the compromises that nobody saw. Walking away feels like declaring all of it meaningless. So the mind does what it does best. It finds another reason to stay, another exception, another version of the story where the investment eventually pays off. The rationalization isn't protecting the relationship, it's protecting you from the grief of acknowledging what it actually costs. The reason it takes so long to see the pattern is not because the signs weren't there. It's because your nervous system adapted to the environment before your conscious mind caught up. You adjusted, you recalibrated what was normal. The way you spoke changed. The way you brought up concerns changed. The things you tolerated expanded so gradually that the shift was invisible from the inside. And there's a cost to that adaptation that no one warns you about. By the time you realize how much you've changed, the original version of yourself feels distant. You look back at early texts, early photos, early memories of who you were before this relationship, and there's a disconnect. The woman who laughed loudly, who spoke her mind without rehearsing it, who didn't second guess her own memory. She didn't leave suddenly. She was edited out, draft by draft, until the version that remained was someone who asked permission to feel things. That's not personal growth. That's erosion disguised as compromise. Recognition doesn't come from a single dramatic moment. It usually comes from something small, a sentence someone else says in passing, a reaction you have that surprises you, a memory that resurfaces with a clarity it didn't have while you were inside the relationship. Your mind finally processed what your body has been carrying for months or years. And in that moment, the entire timeline rearranges. Conversations that seem confusing suddenly have a pattern. Suddenly, fights that felt random suddenly have a structure, and the version of events you were told to believe quietly falls apart. There's a specific kind of silence that follows this realization. It's not relief, it's not anger, it's a deep, still recognition that the person you were trying so hard to understand was never confused. They were deliberate. The chaos wasn't accidental. The inconsistency wasn't emotional immaturity. It was strategy. And the version of yourself that kept searching for a reasonable explanation was not being fair. She was being used. That recognition does not make you weak, it makes you precise. Because now you're not just feeling that something was wrong, you're seeing how it worked. You're understanding the architecture of the manipulation, the rewrites, the emotional reversals, the slow erosion of your confidence. And that understanding does something no amount of venting or anger can do. It makes you structurally immune to the same pattern, not because you become cynical, but because you finally trust your own perception again. The most dangerous lie gaslighting tells is not that you're crazy, it's that your intelligence should have saved you. That if you were really as smart as you think, you would have seen it earlier. But that's the final manipulation, the one that keeps working even after the relationship ends, because it turns your greatest strength into evidence against you. The truth is simpler and harder. You didn't fall for it because you were stupid. You fell for it because you were willing to extend the kind of understanding to someone that they were never going to extend to you. Your intelligence didn't fail you, it was used against you. And recognizing that is not the beginning of distrust, it's the beginning of discernment. You don't need to stop being empathetic. You don't need to stop being analytical. You need to stop directing those skills at people who use your depth as a point of entry. The awareness you have right now in this moment is not something someone gave you. You built it. From pain, from confusion, from every moment you sat in silence, wondering if you were the problem. You were never the problem. You were the target, and now you see it clearly. That clarity is yours. No one gets to rewrite it again.